Scotty
Well,
Alexander.
Kenny Tucker, how are you, buddy?
It looks like we have somebody else that looks a lot better than we look.
Well, of course. So
this year.
I brought along a guest for today. So this is Rachel Harrison, whom I know you've met at one point in time when you were hosting a little event at your place. But I think maybe we just start off, let her introduce who she is, what she does, and then we'll get started on chatting. So Rachel, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. So I am the owner of Trauma Specialists, and we do outpatient mental health therapy. We also have a training component as well, where we train other therapists. So we are here to treat trauma really well and be excellent at what we do and kind of change the way that mental health treatment happens.
That's awesome.
So like when I met Scott, I was traumatized. Is that something that you can help me with?
Exactly. I can totally help you with that.
You help me with
because
that
that happens. You wouldn't be the first. Can I just say that with Scott? I'm just going to say it.
There is some wreckage behind me. It's true. That's funny. Well, so Rachel, I want to jump right into, you and I know each other, and I know that you have, in the fairly short past, gone from, kind of the more traditional, you had a caseload of people you were working with, of clients, and running a successful practice. And at one point you were in, Colorado and in Maryland, and you've been through recently some pretty rapid growth and development and moved away from working in your business to working on your business. And I just want you to have a chance to talk a little bit about what that's like to go through that kind of transition process.
Yeah. So I think even before I made that transition, I started realizing, I'm trained as a therapist. And so I really am not trained as a business owner. And so kind of starting to dabble in realizing I needed some training, some learning in that area is what kind of got me started on that journey. But yeah, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago, I finally just said, I'm not going to see any more clients. And I just went to working on my business. And I think the difference is amazing. I think what I didn't realize, and I know you and I talked about how many roles I was juggling at the same time.
Yeah.
Therapist, as well as supervisor, as well as CEO of the company, as well as group practice owner, kind of all these different hats that I was constantly wearing and shifting in between. And really, I think I would say my business was very limited. I can see that now.
Sure.
By me doing that, right? I couldn't see why I needed to do that initially. It took some time for me to kind of process through that, right? Because that was all I had known. That was my identity, as being a good therapist, And
by all objective measures, you had a very successful practice. You were bigger than most people in this area at having a practice. You had a good reputation. Your clients were engaged with you really well. You had good staff. And so why change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What did you find happened to you in that 1.5 years? Have you found yourself kind of in a place where, do you feel like you've had some transformational growth, or are you kind of in a place now you're set up to have transformational growth here forward? Have you seen a difference already there too?
Yeah, I would say both for sure. I think the idea of scaling has definitely been much more possible, whereas I think I was just looking at the next move for so long, like just the next thing that was in front of me and kind of dealing with that. And I would say the biggest change is being able to sort of have maybe more of a bird's eye view. Like, where is this ship actually going? Like, what do I need to be thinking about down the road? And how do I set things up on the business side to go where I want to go? I would say that's been the big shift. The other really big shift is I've been able to focus some of my time and attention in developing our training institute and training programs, because that really feeds a lot of what we do. And so I would not have had the flexibility to do that. And I think maybe flexibility is the biggest word there, recognizing that I just need to be available for whatever moves and shifts my business needs to make. And that's not something I can do if I'm in the weeds every day working in the business.
How are you? So Scott's gotten through to me very, very eloquently over the years that part of my struggle was culture, right? So I was wearing all those same hats and I had a culture issue. And when I was able to fix the culture, everything else, I was then able to start working on the business. Did you feel like you already had pretty good culture when you decided to step out on, stop practicing it and becoming the owner? Did you already have a good culture, or is that something you had to work on?
No, I had a fairly good culture. I think what has been sort of a thing for me all along has been culture. So early on, I started hiring site supervisors, and their job description was culture as well as clinical support. So we definitely had, I would say, at least the building blocks of that in place. So that was good. I think for me, it was much more of visioning out and sort of being that more visionary leader that my organization needed me to be, instead of working in it so much that I couldn't stop and breathe and see and kind of lead the ship, if you will.
Yeah.
I feel like the culture probably more rested with you, because in many ways, I think when you made that shift, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you had certain superstars in waiting that just kind of took off in ways that were unimaginable because they were free to do so now.
That is true. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So I think
that's one of the hard areas, right? So even when you have the right culture, when I was in the same place you were, I kind of made that change about 3 years ago. And at that point, I knew I had great people, but the reality was when I let go and let them become great, now their income has doubled. Everything that all their goals and their dreams where they're trying to get, I've opened them up to be able to go after that. And that's been the transformational part of business for me when you get out of it. So you'll be seeing that a lot if it's not there already.
Yeah, I think I am definitely seeing some of that. And it's amazing to me to see them doing their thing, right? Shining in the way that they shine and doing something that I really couldn't have done it that way, or maybe even that well.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's it. That's why you have a team. And there's, the first baseman can't play catcher. It's a different set of skills, right? So yeah, that's awesome. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the other struggle for me though, as a leader was like, is that actually a job, right? Is that actually like, am I actually working? If I'm not like seeing the clients in the business, am I actually working? So that's definitely been just a struggle for me to think through, like, what does this actually look like?
Yeah.
That struggle is real. And I don't necessarily think it goes away. I almost feel guilty on days where, if I look back and see what did I accomplish today, some of our accomplishments, you're not going to be able to put your fingers on. You're not really going to know it's an accomplishment for a little while, right? So I have days of guilt, to be honest with you. And as everything, as the good that keeps coming, you start to let some of the guilt go. And now I realize half my people don't even want me here. They're like, hey, you can just, why don't you take off today? Why don't you go play golf today or whatever?
Don't you have something else you could do?
Get out of the way.
Yeah, but it's fascinating. I had to take managers to a place where they know expectations and they know where we're trying to go. And I give them the groundworks of how do you get from point A to point C, but they've got to figure out what is point B and what are they going to do in between. And I'm not gonna lie to you, business is fun. It's doing this is fun, having the time to be able to do this. Scott knows 2.5 years ago, this is that time of year where I'm just a basket case of stress, because this is when we start to slow down, and it's just great.
And I would laugh at him. That's when I would traumatize him, because I would laugh at him and go, last year we had the same conversation right about now. When are you gonna?
What do you mean it's gonna be 71 degrees out today and tomorrow? I can't work if it's 71 degrees out.
100%. Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that though, Rachel. I call it the gauntlet. As your company gets bigger, and the theoretical construct is, you walk in your front door of your business, and you're going to have to walk to your office in the back, and you walk in the first office and you say, hey, how's good morning, and how's it going? And they go, my kid won their little league game with a home run, and you celebrate together for those 3 to 7 minutes. And you go to the next person, you go, hey, how was your weekend? And now you're all up, and they're like, oh, my dog died. And you sit there in sadness with that person for 3 to 7 minutes. And you walk that gauntlet, and by the time you get back to your office, you're exhausted. And to your point, Kenny, you look and you say, what did I accomplish today? Well, that might have been the most important hour you spent all day, because those people have now connected to you and you've connected to them. They've showed that you care, that it's not just the work. I mean, we're all here to work. You all have heard me say before about, work is an artificial environment. But we still want to be cared about, right? I mean, we still want to be around people who connect on some level with us as human beings. And so I think it's redefining, Kenny, what it means to accomplish.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. So I have an employee who's one of my service techs who he's a little bit older, but his father had passed away. So he moved in, he's single, moved in with his mom to kind of help her through her elder years. And she just passed away at the end of last week. So stuff is happening tomorrow. Old Ken, yes, I have sympathy and I don't want him to hurt or whatever. But then you still have to go through your day. New Ken, I learned from talking to him because I had time. He's stressing because he lives in a house his mom had a reverse mortgage and he doesn't know what that means. So he's coming from I don't know if I'm going to get kicked out of my house in 30 days. So I had the opportunity now. Let me do some research. Let me call people that I know in my inner circle. Let me find out for him. And in a matter of minutes, I was able to call him back and say, hey, relax on the reverse mortgage. It's actually a loan. The bank doesn't own your house. You have 3 options and you kind of go through it. Yeah. And I'm gonna, tomorrow I have time. I'm gonna be able to, go to Manassas, Virginia in the morning to go to the funeral or whatever. And this is a guy who he actually, and I don't mean to be strange, but when he hung up, he's like, I got to tell you, I love you and Mike. He was kind of like coming from, because it's just looking at the world and being able to have my eyes open to that. 5 years ago, my eyes would not have been open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. It's just.
And meanwhile, your bottom line's growing.
My bottom line's growing and culture is better. And, you have employees that are going to
people want to work for you, right? I mean, do you want to work harder for somebody that cares, or do you want to work harder for somebody doesn't give a crap?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So as you were playing through, Rachel, how did you a lot of what Scott and I end up talking about is lenses. How do you see the world? And some of us come from look at the world through a very positive lens. I know people that look at life through a very negative lens, right? So as a business owner you've changed your lens in the last year and a half. Can you talk at all about how you see that, if you can use that connotation lens, and how are you seeing business before? What lens were you looking at? And then, how did you manipulate that, if you don't mind me asking?
No, that's a great question. I think I was looking at business just through the lens of my organization and what we were doing. Really, I had some contacts with a couple other group practice owners that I talked to somewhat, but I think I was so just looking at what was in front of me because I was all consuming, because that was all I had time for. I feel like in the last year and a half, I've sort of like come up for air and looked around the world and like seen, oh, there's all these other businesses. There's all these other things going on. I've made a lot more relationships and connections with other people, both locally as well as around the country. So I think for me, kind of speaking to what your point about the connectedness piece almost, I think I've gone from feeling more like everything was on me to accomplish to seeing myself as more part of a larger world, community.
Did you always see yourself as an entrepreneur, or did you see yourself, and I don't know what the proper term, did you see yourself as a therapist? Were you a therapist first and entrepreneurship just kind of happened, or was that something you always dreamed about?
Nope, it wasn't something I ever dreamed about. I ended up in private practice completely accidentally because I was working for somebody pretty terrible, and I was like, I got to get out of this, and so I ended up in my solo practice that way. And
hold on a second. Now that's hitting a little close to home. Who was the person you were working for? Wasn't in this small group of 3 here, was it?
No, it was not.
Okay.
I know it wasn't me.
It wasn't Ken, I can tell you that. No, it was not you, Scott.
There was a time, full disclosure, there was a time when Rachel and I worked together.
That's true.
How long ago was that?
It was actually the place that I left when I was working with you. I left there, and the place I went to was the place that traumatized me. Yeah. Yeah.
So after you left Scott, you got traumatized, huh? That makes sense.
Right? No, but so I didn't ever really, I mean, I think I saw myself maybe as an entrepreneur in the very smallest sense of the word. I knew I liked working for myself and being my own boss, and I've done that for a really long time. But in terms of the bigger, like making bigger business decisions and things, yeah, that's been more recent. And definitely, I think the switch from not working in the business to working on the business has definitely identified me more as an entrepreneur internally. But that's been a process. Definitely didn't start out thinking I'm an entrepreneur and this is my chosen field. Not at all. I'm a
Yeah.
therapist and kind of just got here somehow.
But Ken, isn't that kind of what you and your brother did? I mean, you started off in a garage. He was the HVAC tech. You were the numbers guy, and we were just going to run a business.
Yep. I mean, I always dreamed about it, but I didn't know how to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of self-taught, and you kind of just you make your mistakes and you keep going. But so that was something that my father was an entrepreneur, so I always kind of wanted to be like my dad. So I always thought I would ultimately be in business for myself, but I never really knew how or what is the process to make it happen. But I always did see, I am somebody who I see life through a lens of opportunity. So if there's, even when things are going bad or wrong, I still see there's always a light for me. So I still always saw the world as, okay, yeah, I'm struggling right now, but I'm going to come out of this stronger or better. How in terms of your personality, what kind of lens do you see the world through from a personality perspective?
Yeah, I'm definitely a glass half full person. I always see things probably through a positive lens, I would say. And I think I always see people through that. So maybe that opportunity thing is me too. I always see like, oh, I might be able to connect to this person. And if the opportunity is to work with them, that's exciting to me. It's harder for me to say no to those opportunities. I'm more interested in always finding those.
I mean, think about all the positives that you took out of having that bad experience with the one person you were working for or whatever, right? So you have those bad experiences. And if you look at life through a negative lens, it's just like, okay, here it goes, here we go again, and I'm gonna go do it over here or whatever. But you came out of that with, okay, now I know this is what I don't want to be, and now an opportunity arose. That's an opportunity that arose out of a bad experience, right? If you had a great experience there, you might not be sitting with us right now.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
I probably would not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and isn't it fascinating though, once you pick what did you say, when I feel like I pulled my head up and I see from a bird's eye view, but when you start to see there, isn't it amazing how many opportunities have come your way in the last 12 months?
Unreal.
It is all around all of us. And I think that's part of what Scott and I are trying to do with even doing this on a, bi-monthly basis. We're trying to, there's so much out there for everybody, but most people have their eyes closed. I mean, it's every day there's an opportunity.
Or they're looking in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I was in Royal Farms the other day, and I basically offered a cashier job. I mean, and he didn't take me up on it, which is fine, but he was so good at customer service, and he's working at Royal Farms or whatever. And it was like, my eyes are open to things now that they never would have been before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I'm fascinated right down here where I am. There's two restaurants right next to each other. One of them is always thriving. The other one's always struggling. One of them never advertises for employees, but somehow finds employees, and the other one's constantly advertising for employees. One of them is actually looking at maybe buying the other one because, and you can walk across the parking lot from one to the other. So they're overlooking the same harbor. They're in a beach town. They're, in the exact same market. And in fact, the one that's struggling has a way better facility and can't keep people. So, culture. Where's the culture? The culture always points back to the leadership, right? I mean, it's astounding when you really start to understand, because it's easier to go and look at the quantifiable stuff. Oh, well, I have so many square feet. I have X number of employees. My monthly rent is this. The market can, it's 72 degrees in November, and nobody's turning their heaters on, so I'm not going to be busy. but you know, as you know, Ken, you find other things to focus in on when those opportunities hit.
Mm.
I want to take it to another thing. So Rachel, you said something to me while Ken was away, while we're waiting for him, that, you know, it's, you know, what is this? I mean, there's an opportunity coming your way that, you know, because somebody's really struggling. And you made the comment that, and I'm paraphrasing, but, you know, people are either like really doing well or they're really struggling. There's not a lot of in between.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Say more about that.
Well, I just think it's fascinating. You know, I've been a therapist, so I've been in the therapy world for like 24 years now. So kind of watching things and the amount of change, definitely with the pandemic, but even I would say within the last 6 months, I feel like everyone I talk to in my business world is either really struggling, thinking of throwing the towel in and doing something totally different, or they're going gangbusters and thinking they want a location all over the United States. And these are just the conversations I've been having, and nobody is kind of in that middle of the road kind of place.
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing that.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating to me, you know, what is it exactly that has created this? Is it the pandemic? Is it the economic climate? Is it political climate? I mean, there's all kinds of questions to what's making this happen.
But again, to what I was saying before, or it could just simply be as simple as, you know, the business owner, do they understand, have they picked their head up and looked around the world, or are they, you know, nose to the road and they're not seeing the opportunity in front of them because they can't, they're too busy and they're, you know, just, you know, time to make the donuts.
So what is
I think we're all old enough to get that reference.
What does a middle of the road look like to you guys? So when you're saying nobody's like in the middle of the road, you're just saying they're either really excited and very positive, or they're really just not excited. So maybe even the really positive people might be in the middle. They just are acting like they're not. I mean,
I'm looking at it more like growth. So like the people are either actively building their practices and growing and have that vision, or they're actively looking at ending and closing their practices and things just really aren't working. I'm not seeing very many people that are like, here we are as this size practice and we're just going like steady as she goes kind of thing. At least that's my thought.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of is right up the line of, again, what Scott and I are trying to do right now. So that person or that business who is thinking about, we all have to think about what's going on, right? So inflation is a real concern. We have,
sure.
I mean, in my world, they're changing refrigerants again. They're changing, you know, they're changing they're going to a Sear 2 unit, which doesn't mean anything to anybody, but they're changing the equipment, they're changing the efficiencies, they're changing expectations. Money is getting insane. So if you look at it, if I'm sitting back worried about inflation, that's one avenue, that's one lens I can look through. But if I'm working off of margin, to be honest, because I sell services and a material, right? So if I'm working off of margins, and something that used to cost $1,000 now costs $1,500, and I'm working off of margin, I actually make more money today than I did when it was 1,000, right? So if you have your numbers right, and if you understand it or whatever, inflation isn't scary. The scary part is how are consumers going to pay for it? So now instead of focusing on inflation, I'm focusing on how is the consumer going to be able to deal with this? And so now I have a whole nother subset of negotiations with finance companies. So now I'm able to offer a 5-year same as cash, right? Without any cost to the consumer. So there's other ways of getting to an outcome. So inflation isn't scary because I'm going to make more money because of inflation. But most people don't see it that way, or, you know, how can I charge this hourly rate if I'm doing consultations, or I guess therapy is probably more on an hourly rate or something.
It is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So how do I show our value compared to somebody else? But people get so caught in the negative vibe. That's that lens, you know, and if you can put that lens down and look at through the lens of opportunity, or what else is really around you, you know, or that individual just needs to go out and meet a Scott and have somebody to talk to, you know, about business, just to get them to see the world a little different. Yeah. You know, and then when you see the world a little bit different, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. It doesn't mean that it's all gravy. It just means everything that happens, there's an outcome, and I'm going to make every outcome as positive I can, even if it's negative. You know what I mean? But we're trying to kind of get that out there into the mainstream on some form, because too many people look at all this stuff as like, holy crap, look at what gas just did. How am I going to pay? I mean, even in my company, gas went from, we were 13 or 14 grand a month in gas across my fleet. Now I'm at $26,000 a month, right? So I've grown, but I haven't grown like that, right? So my gas costs have almost doubled, you know, in the last year and a half. You know, how do you deal with that? How do you whatever? So I could be like, okay, we got to stop driving, but you gotta, you gotta look
That ain't
at
gonna work.
No, but you just got to look at it. You know, it's how do you look at it, and how do you get other people to kind of see everybody could be in that fast-paced trajectory. They just don't necessarily know it.
Yeah.
And what lens are they looking at to make them feel the way that they're currently feeling? You know?
True.
I think a lot of people put on that lens where what they see are the barriers rather than the opportunities.
Yeah,
and the barriers are real. Yeah.
But what about fear? I mean, to me, I just hear fear, right, as the driver for that. Like, as soon as fear comes in, it's so easy to say, look at gas prices, look at inflation. Am I even going to have a job? Or, we can just go down this road so quickly.
No good decisions. And no good decisions come from fear.
Right.
None.
Well, and we know that as soon as fear, anxiety, or anger kick in, that our executive function gets decreased.
Yep.
And, we have been kind of living in a state of fear for a long period of time.
But if you're in a, but like Rachel,
there's a good question. So how do you recognize that in yourself and get out of it then?
So I would say that the conversation with some people needs to be, if you have fear, it's because there's something that you don't know, because it's fear of the unknown typically, right? So if you're all worried about the unknown, which is inflation or what can that homeowner afford or whatever, depending on what arena you're playing in. So it's fear is the unknown. So how do you fix that? Make sure you know everything. So I would assume, Rachel, within your business, when you made a transition, I would assume if we really got down into the nitty gritty, you know your numbers, you know your business, you know your numbers, you know your costs, you know what things need to be, right? So you're able to make business decisions, not fear-based decisions.
True.
Right.
Although I have to tell you, I don't think for me, the knowledge part is the part that's not how I deal with fear personally. I think for me, maybe there's a little bit more of an emotional or relational response, right? So I know that I feel the fear, and for me, I need to talk that through. I need to say, okay, it's here. I need to talk to somebody about it. And that usually helps me sort of shift my perspective, really just be able to process my thoughts, my emotions around it. And that helps me go forward anyway, regardless of the fear. So for me, it's less about the information and just more about that walking through the emotion, like, okay, it's there, and here's what that is, and then what am I going to do anyway? This isn't something that's going to stop me. Maybe mindset a little bit,
but is that
even that? I think some of that's hard, which goes back to our experience with the gentleman you had on here a while back. That Brandon, what if you don't have access? What if the person you have access to talk through that fear is even more fearful than you and exacerbates your fear? And so there still comes down to this, who you surround yourself with is crucial, isn't it? I mean, am I saying that wrong, Rachel? I want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting what you're saying.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I would be choosy about who I would have that conversation with. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because if you came to me or you were talking about some fear-based business, something, and I've already been through that, and I have the ability to say, hey, it's okay, I've been through it, this is kind of how it looks, that might make you feel more comfortable. But that kind of comes back to what I meant was you now have better information.
Okay. Fair.
Right.
Fair.
So as you're kind of playing through things, so when you've gone through it, I've been through a mortgage crash with, owning real estate. I've bought high at the wrong time. I've, sold at the right time. Everybody's, 2008, I went through that. I've, all the things that are going on now, it's all happened before. Right?
It's all cyclical.
It is all cyclical. So, yes, who you have around and whatever, but I think and I probably bring things back to understanding numbers, not because I'm a numbers guy. So that's kind of the way I would quantify it. But, you have your financial statements, you have your cash flow, your balance sheet, all that stuff. And if there's something going on, if inflation hit the company hard, and my revenues drop 20% next year because people didn't have money to be able to afford to do whatever we're doing. Okay, there's a plan for that. So I kind of look at it, and what is that plan? Well, I'm going to make sure that I'm talking to culturally all my employees. Make sure you're, individually, I talk to them about everybody's, go be great. So if everybody's great and everybody's growing or whatever, I won't let anybody go in that instance. But if that happens and you have a couple of guys that are just kind of skating through, they probably won't be here.
Yeah. Well, and me, I put on my Zen glasses, and I'm sure both of you have heard me say this before, right? I mean, you go back to the art of war. The first thing they say is, you may die tomorrow, so live today. And I go, okay, what's it look like if you take this great risk and you fail? It doesn't look like death. You're not dead. You've learned more information. You've still done all these different things throughout your life that you can draw on now, and you go back to the drawing board and you start over again, whether that's getting another job or whether that's starting a new business or whatever it is. I mean, it's not pleasant, but it's not death either. So, you gotta do your evaluation and decide, to your point, Kenny, whether or not this is a calculated risk that you're willing to take. And then, you gotta have a way to combat that fear for yourself, whether that's finding the right people to talk to or, talking to your own team of individuals in your own head. So
there's I have one, he's a retail guy, different business than mine, and he's completely upside down in fear, right? Based on inflation, and he doesn't know his inventory. He really doesn't work off a margin, so he doesn't know what he's paying for things. He's late on his bills. I mean, he's got all this anxiety of everything, and the reality is I tried working with him a little bit, and it's kind of like, hey, do you know which area of your business you make the most money? Let's start focusing there or whatever, right? And he deals with probably 6 different divisions, and he has no idea. And he's an individual that's gonna fail, but he's gonna fail because he doesn't know, right?
Yeah.
So he's making really bad business decisions, both from a cash perspective and a business perspective, and there's nothing you can do for that other than he's got to just go do his thing.
Yeah.
But trying to get people to see it a little bit different, it's not that hard as long as you take the time.
Because he may very well have all the puzzle pieces he needs if he could just change that lens and look at it as, where are my opportunities? Yes, you acknowledge, like we were saying, Rachel. I mean, you acknowledge that inflation has had a negative impact, and you might even have the emotional reaction and go, this sucks, which is fine. And then, okay, once you get done with that, what am I going to do about it? And it's just a different way. It's a different lens. I mean, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but it really is different, looking at it through a different perspective or lens.
The whole, when we came up with this whole lens thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not complicated.
No. And I think that's part of the appeal of it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, look, we're about out of time because, I'm always a timekeeper, and I'm pretty sure we ran over, but
yeah, I think so.
It is what it is, but I'm going to give Rachel, you get the last word. If you want to sum up and tell us what's important, and we'll sign off.
What's important? Surrounding yourself with the right people and having good information, right? Is that what we came down to?
I think that's what we came down to.
Financial information, especially. Yeah. Know your business. Know your business.
Absolutely.
And know what lens you're looking through when you're making decisions.
100%. Well, Rachel, thanks again for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. We could just keep going, I think.
Well, we might after we turn the camera off.
Yeah, as soon as the camera goes off and we hit stop, we keep going.
Nice.
The night is young.
Well, thank you guys. Kenny, I'll see you in 2 weeks.
You got it. Thank you, Rachel.
Bye-bye.